Hi there. Welcome to Oaklandside 510. I am Tasneem Raja, Editor-in-Chief of the Oaklandside, Oakland's independent nonprofit newsroom. Election Day is June 2nd. That is so soon. If you need to get caught up, this app's for you. Today, I'm going to walk you through everything Oakland voters need to know about the June 2nd primary. We will break down the Alameda County District Attorney's race, one of the most consequential local races in years, with news editor Darwin Bongram and our public safety reporter, Rosalind Romero. Then, City Hall reporters Eli Wolf and Natalie Ornstein will explain two Oakland ballot measures you will be deciding on: a proposed parcel tax and a business tax relief plan. Lastly, I will give you the basics on how and where to vote, where to turn for more good information, including about local and state races we are not covering. First, I would like to shout out some amazing student journalism that the Oaklandside has been co-creating with some fantastic local student journalists, and an event next week where you can catch it all live. We are publishing a series of in-depth and investigative reporting on Oakland high schools in collaboration with 12 Oakland high school students. It's a fellowship program that we launched for the first time earlier this year with support from the Stewart Foundation. The stories we have published so far have explored why some Oakland high schools have way more AP classes than others, and why it is shockingly hard to get permission to go to the bathroom, sometimes in some Oakland schools. They're also highlighting the creativity, resilience, and determination across OUSD's school communities. Now, next Wednesday, May 20th, at the new Parkway, you can hear about all of this reporting directly from our high school journalists and Oaklandside reporters. I would love to see you there. If you listen to the podcast, please be sure to come up and say hi. Okay, on to the June election. Let's get into it. I'm here with Darwin and Rosalind to talk about the Alameda County District Attorney's race. Hey, guys.
Hey, Tasneem.
Hey.
All right, 3 candidates, a lot of history, and a primary where someone could actually win outright on June 2nd. Let's start with the basics. Rosalind, for anyone who doesn't know what a district attorney does, and by the way, I'm guessing that's most people, can you explain?
That's right. So the district attorney, or the DA, is the top prosecutor for Alameda County. That means her office brings criminal charges against people who are accused by police of felony and misdemeanor crimes. Mm-hmm. The DA also oversees different divisions of the office, like victim witness assistance, which supports crime victims and witnesses, and the Consumer, Environmental, and Worker Protection Division, which handles fraud and other business-related crimes.
Okay, thank you. That's super helpful. All right, so Darwin, who is running to be the next district attorney in Alameda County?
There are 3 candidates. The incumbent, Ursula Jones-Dixon, who was appointed by the Alameda County Board of Supervisors in January 2025. That was after the recall of Pamela Price. Mm-hmm. There's Pamela Price, of course. She was elected DA in 2022, but recalled by voters in 2024. She's running to get her old job back.
Yep.
And there's Gopal Krishan, a family law attorney from Milpitas. He's new to electoral politics.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So remind us, just how does this primary work? And one of them can just win outright in June, possibly?
Yeah, that's right. So this is a county level race, which means if any of the candidates gets more than 50% of the vote on June 2nd, they win, full stop. There won't be a runoff in November. But if no one clears that threshold, the top 2 vote getters, they go to November.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now let's get into each candidate a little more. Rosalind, let's start with Jones-Dixon. Tell us more about her.
Sure. So Jones-Dixon spent years in the Alameda County DA's office working as a prosecutor before Governor Jerry Brown appointed her to the Superior Court back in 2013. Mm-hmm. She then served as a judge for about a dozen years, primarily in the county's juvenile court, including a lot of cases involving kids at risk of abandonment. She left that bench to take the DA appointment in 2025. Mm-hmm. So since taking office office, she has reversed several of the biggest reforms that Pamela Price put into place, including a policy that barred prosecutors from using sentencing enhancements without high-level approval, and a policy that kept most juvenile cases out of adult criminal court.
And sentencing enhancement, for anyone who isn't familiar with that term, Rosalind, is it right to say basically piling on more charges than you might otherwise see?
That's right.
Okay, got it.
Jones-Dickson also reinstated mandatory minimum sentences for illegal gun possession.
Mm-hmm.
Her focus, in her words, is victims' rights and making sure that the DA's office is well managed.
Got it. I've seen from you guys' reporting, she has a lot of institutional support.
She does. Every mayor in Alameda County has endorsed her. That includes Berkeley, Hayward, and Oakland. She also has the backing of California Attorney General Rob Bonta, 4 out of 5 county supervisors, the county sheriff, and the union that represents the DA's office's own prosecutors, which gave her $30,000, her largest single contribution.
Mm-hmm. And we know she also just has a lot of, everyday supporters. Now, what about her critics?
Some of her critics say that she has failed to hold police officers and environmental polluters accountable.
Mm-hmm.
They usually mention her decision to drop criminal charges against 2 Alameda County sheriff's deputies who were accused of falsifying records related to a Santa Rita jail inmate's suicide. And they also mention her decision to ask a judge to dismiss the case against a San Leandro police officer who shot and killed Stephen Taylor in a Walmart in 2020.
Mm-hmm.
She also dismissed a criminal case against Radius Recycling, which some may formally recognize as Schnitzer Steel,
Right.
Related to a massive West Oakland fire back in 2023. She later initiated a civil lawsuit against that company, though.
Got it.
Other critics, particularly those who advocate for juvenile justice, say that she's been too punitive against children accused of crimes.
Mm-hmm. Now, that came up a couple times at a recent candidates forum organized by our newsroom, Oaklandside, and our sister newsroom, Berkeleyside, where an attendee asked Jones-Dickson about that. Here is an edited version of that question just for the sake of time and Jones-Dickson's full response.
My question is for Ms. Jones-Dickson. As you talked about, the residents, black and brown, working class, have been a victim of the DA's policies under Nancy O'Malley, all that possession,
and what question, please?
How she represents a continuation of those policies that many residents of Alameda County have been victims of. The disproportionate minority confinement for juveniles and the death penalty ban on folks from Berkeley and other progressive counties.
Go ahead, Ms. Jones-Dickson.
I would say this. I'm tired of people acting like the victims don't look like me too. So I'm just going to say, to answer your question, this is a more holistic conversation about crime in this country. It's not that simplistic. You and I both know it. The victims look like me too. They're black and brown too. And when we start having a conversation about why that's happening to us and sometimes by us, then we need to, nobody's coming to save us, we got to figure that out. So that question is not a question that I can answer directly. What I can tell you is when we start having that healing within our own communities about how we're handling our own business, then we can have a decent conversation about that.
Thank you.
All right, turning to the second candidate in this race, Pamela Price. She was recalled from this very position in 2024. Darwin, who is she and why is she running again?
Price is a civil rights attorney who founded her own law firm in Oakland in 1991. She was the first Black woman elected Alameda County DA in 2022. Her tenure focused heavily on addressing racial disparities in prosecution, pursuing resentencing for people already in prison, and bringing police accountability cases.
Right.
On the issue of resentencing, Price says her approach was to address racial inequities in sentences and seek reduced sentences, sometimes allowing people to go free from prison. And she said this reduced cost for the state. There is some data backing this up. A recent study from UC Berkeley found that lots of people resentenced under Price were over the age of 50, which made them unlikely to commit further crimes when they were freed, and that the release may have saved taxpayers about $287 million. Price says the recall was driven by misinformation. Basically, she says that she was accused of being soft on criminals and not doing enough for victims, and that voters deserve to hear her case directly. I should note that she also came under fire for hiring her boyfriend for a role in the DA's office without properly disclosing their relationship. She was also criticized for a drop in the number of cases filed when she ran the office and for a misdemeanor case backlog that needed to be cleared.
Okay, so what does she have to say about the criticisms people level against her? Rosalind?
She says the office she inherited was in disarray and that her critics were very fixated on removing her from the very beginning of her tenure. On a higher level, she argues that criminal justice reform is still what Alameda County needs and that the recall reversed real progress from happening.
Yeah. At our forum, Price was given an opportunity to speak about the recall in her own words. Here's what she had to say, starting with a question from an Oaklandside moderator.
Ms. Price, as you alluded to, voters overwhelmingly recalled you from office. Why do you think the recall was successful, and what, if anything, would you do differently as a result of that experience?
Sure.
2 minutes.
I think that the recall was successful because voters can only rely on the information that they receive, and they were misinformed. The people who fed them the information were absolutely wrong. They were fixated on removing me from office before I even took the office. And so they misled voters. They told voters I was responsible for all the crime in Oakland and all the businesses closing. They told voters that I was not charging cases and releasing all the criminals. Eric Swalwell said the cops catch and Pamela releases, which was absolutely false because, as my successor points out, the judge decides who gets released and who doesn't, and often the district attorney is fighting against someone being released. But facts did not matter to the people that wanted to stop us from moving forward. And they were able to effectively capture the media attention and the drama and manipulate and highlight the pain, the grief of victims, real victims in this community, were paraded and used to excite people's emotions and tell them that I didn't care about these victims and that I prioritized defendants over victims. I spent my 33 years representing victims, standing in the gap for victims. I've been standing in the gap for survivors since 1977. And yet they were able to persuade folks that somehow I didn't care about survivors. And then, of course, I was personally incompetent because I'm a Black woman and I don't know how to run a big, large office like this. They said that when we missed deadlines and I hired all the wrong people, that therefore the recall was justified.
One thing I'll add to that regarding the case backlog, Price has said that it was a pre-existing issue. And she pointed out that up until she was DA, the office had never really been transparent about the number of cases it was filing or other basic data.
Okay, that's good to know. Listeners, now maybe you were one of the 200 or so people in the room during that candidates forum, or maybe you've watched the live stream, which we will link to in the show notes. If so, you know this race is very, very heated in Alameda County. Here is a clip from our forum that brings that tension to life.
This campaign is about moving our justice system forward with a stronger, disciplined approach to public safety. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, as a reminder, we're all here to hear the candidates. Let's keep it civil, please.
My truck got stolen. The guy that stole it got murdered somebody a year later. She charged the case.
Okay, we're going to move on.
So, Darwin, is it fair to say that this election is a contest between a more law and order vision of how we should be thinking about crime in Alameda County versus a vision that's more interested in rehabilitation and diversion than punishment? Or is that too simplistic?
I think this is how a lot of diehard supporters of Jones-Dixon and Price see this race. For them, it's really polarized. People who recognize that in Alameda County, there's historically been a lack of police accountability and that the criminal legal system has been systematically and disproportionately harsher on Black and low-income people, they do tend to gravitate toward Price and what she's talking about, the themes, the issues, the policies she wants to bring to bear. Those who are more focused on the county's high rates of crime, particularly in Oakland, and those who believe the solution to crime is to have police and prosecutors enforce the law and incarcerate people who break the law, they tend to gravitate towards Jones-Dixon and what she's talking about. For them, Jones-Dixon is a correction to the pandemic years when crime spiked. And these are years that, those types of voters associate with what they believe are failed progressive policies. There are other nuanced questions and concerns that are going to influence people's votes, of course. We touched on this briefly, but one question is whether or not Price or Jones-Dixon are capable managers of the DA's office. Because regardless of where someone falls on the ideological spectrum when it comes to crime and the justice system and the kinds of policies they want to see put in place, if a voter doesn't have confidence in the candidate and that person will capably carry out the agenda, you're probably less likely to vote for them, right? So even if the vision they're promoting is something people like, they may not go to the ballot box for them.
Yeah, thanks, Darwin. One thing worth noting for listeners, the DA manages an office with 370 staffers and a $111 million budget. This isn't just a philosophical debate. This is a very consequential and very big job. Now, there's a third candidate, Gopal Krishnan. Tell us about him, Rosalind.
Sure. Krishnan is a lawyer with about 16 years of experience who works at a Milpitas firm focusing on family and immigration law. He has never held elected office. His platform is centered on protecting immigrants from ICE, cracking down on hate crimes, and going after organized retail theft. He's said the DA's office needs a complete overhaul, not just a change at the top. He hasn't raised as much money as the other two candidates, about $27,000 compared to Jones-Dixon's nearly $300,000 in the first months of the year, and Price's roughly $72,000.
Rosalind, for anyone still making up their mind in this race, leave us with this. What do you think is the clearest way to think about the contours of this race?
The clearest difference is between Jones-Dixon and Price. Jones-Dixon represents a return to more traditional prosecution, more use of sentencing enhancements, mandatory minimums, a stronger relationship with police agencies. At our forum, Jones-Dixon came back to the topic of victims' rights repeatedly. And she talked a lot about the importance of competence and keeping the office out of politics. Price, on the other hand, represents a reform vision that her supporters say was cut short, and her critics say was already tried and failed. She frames the race as a referendum on whether the county will continue criminal justice reform or go back to what she called the failed practices of the past.
Yeah.
Krishnan is the wild card. He's speaking to a real anxiety in immigrant communities about federal enforcement, and he's tapping into frustration with both of the other candidates. He says the entire system is broken and that neither of his opponents is willing to change it. But he has fewer endorsements and far less money.
Thanks, Darwin. Thanks, Rosalind. You can read all of the Oaklandside's coverage of the Alameda County District Attorney's race at oaklandside.org. We'll link to everything in the show notes. Now we're going to dig into the two Oakland ballot measures that are getting a lot of conversation around town. First up, Measure E. Now, Eli Wolf covers City Hall for us. Eli, welcome. And what is Measure E?
Hey, all. Measure E is a proposed parcel tax, a tax on property that would raise about $34 million a year for the next 9 years. That money would go towards police, fire, homelessness services, and programs that keep public spaces clean. If it passes, single-family homeowners in Oakland would pay about $190 a year. Apartment building owners would pay about $130 per unit. And for commercial properties, the rate varies based on size.
Got it. So how did this get onto the ballot?
Yeah, it's a citizen initiative, which means this came from people gathering signatures around town as opposed to coming from the city council. So the main driving force here was Oakland's major city employee unions. They spent hundreds of thousands of dollars collecting signatures from over 30,000 residents to get it on there. And because this is a citizens initiative, it only needs a simple majority, so 50% plus one to pass.
Okay, and why now? Why is it on the ballot this year?
Yeah, so probably not a huge surprise to people who live here, but Oakland's budget has been in rough shape for years. The city has made painful cuts to services, and the 2025-2027 budget that the city council approved last year actually banked on this tax passing. So city leaders built the revenue into their projections. Mayor Barbara Lee is backing the measure, as are most members of the city council.
Who doesn't like it?
An interesting coalition of groups. They basically argue that Oakland is a spending and accountability problem, not a revenue problem. So one prominent group that's come out against this is Empower Oakland. This is an advocacy group connected to former councilmember Lauren Taylor. They say voters already approved Measure NN in 2024 to raise $30 million annually for public safety. That included a requirement to maintain 700 police officers. But the city's budget currently only funds 678. So they basically argue that Oaklanders are being asked to pay for promises that the city hasn't kept.
Got it.
Real estate groups are also opposed. And there's a broader argument that this tax falls hardest on lower income residents.
Meaning, $190 a year, that's going to be harder on some people than others.
Exactly. Opposition has really been mounting against Measure E in recent days. The East Bay Times just published an editorial urging voters to reject it. The League of Women Voters, which publishes voter guides as opposed to it, they say in their materials that it's the fourth revenue-generating measure proposed in 2 years and that the funds can be spent too flexibly. And Spur, a local urban planning advocacy group that's in favor of 3 other measures on the ballot, has taken no position on Measure E.
Okay, now what about the people who do like Measure E? What are they saying?
Yeah, supporters point out that there's this separate levy that's been funding the city's old police and firefighter pension system and that it's winding down. So for many homeowners, even if Measure E passes, their overall local tax bill might not go up much or could even go down slightly because that old tax is expiring.
Got it.
The measure also includes an oversight body and biennial audits by the city auditor to track how the money is spent. And I should also note that there are going to be exemptions within the measure for people who are lower income, for seniors, other groups that might be heavily impacted.
And presumably supporters would also just say, look, the money for some of the stuff this is meant to fund has got to come from somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. If this tax doesn't get approved, that's going to blow a big hole in the budget.
Okay, so what does happen if it fails?
So we don't know exactly what will happen if it fails. Mayor Lee's proposed budget is not going to count on Measure E revenue. We'll know the details of what's in that budget when she releases it on Friday. Separately, she's also going to release a separate Measure E spending plan for the extra stuff if that measure does pass. That's also supposed to come out on Friday.
Thanks, Eli. Okay, guys, Eli Wolf has covered Measure E in depth. You can find his full reporting at oaklandside.org. We'll link to it in the show notes. The other Oakland ballot measure getting a lot of attention is Measure C. That is a business tax relief proposal. Natalie Ornstein has been covering this one for Oaklandside. Welcome, Natalie, and tell us, what would Measure C do?
Hey, thanks for having me. So Measure C would give small businesses a year off from paying the city's business tax in 2027. In this case, small businesses means those that gross under $1 million a year. And brand new businesses of any size would also get to skip paying up to $1 million in taxes their first year in business. So basically, it's a tax break meant to support small businesses and encourage new ones to come to Oakland. The city council voted unanimously to put this one on the ballot. And like Measure E, it needs a simple majority to pass.
So how many businesses are we talking about here?
The city estimates that about 12,000 existing businesses could claim that temporary tax break, plus any new businesses that open in Oakland in 2027. We're talking restaurants, shops, personal services, entertainment businesses, manufacturers, basically a wide range. And then others are not eligible. That includes hotels, cannabis businesses, landlords, and utility companies.
Interesting. Okay, so what's the trade-off here for the city?
Well, the city would lose about $2 million in revenue this first year if the measure passes. And I should note the city council could vote to extend this measure for a few more years. For context, the city collects about $130 million in business tax revenue each year. So it's a small slice, but it comes out of the general fund, which we just discussed has been running deficits.
Okay, so how about the business owners? Do they like it?
Well, I walked around North Oakland and downtown the other week to ask a bunch of them. I went to a bunch of places, including Premium Tattoo and Hairpin and Strop Barbershop on Broadway, East 14th Gallery, among other places. Those business owners told me they largely support it, but many did say it's not enough on its own. You know, people are dealing with rising costs, break-ins, foot traffic that hasn't totally recovered since the pandemic.
Yeah.
So most welcome any relief, but they also want some bigger structural changes. They brought up help with parking, better enforcement of city rules, more stable business environment in general.
Yeah.
One business owner we spoke with put this in context. They said avoiding the tax for a year would cover a couple months of their PG&E bills. So, you know, real money, but not a lifeline.
Got it. Thank you, Natalie. Natalie Ornstein covers City Hall for the Oaklandside. Her full story on Measure C is at oaklandside.org. Link is in the show notes. Okay, to close us out, election basics. Here's everything you need to know about actually voting. If you are registered in Alameda County, you should have received a ballot in the mail by now. The registrar started mailing them on May 4th. Now you have several options for how to cast that ballot. You could fill it out and mail it back. If you go this route, drop it in a mailbox soon. Don't wait until June 2nd. You could fill it out and drop it at one of the 24-hour ballot drop boxes that opened on May 4th. There are locations across the county. Or you can vote in person at a voting center. Some centers will open on May 23rd. More will open on May 30th. And all voting centers will be open on June 2nd, which is the last day to vote. The first batch of results should be posted by 8 p.m. that night, but just know it can take days or even weeks to get the final count. Now, if you still need to register, the deadline to register online is May 18th, but you can still vote. California allows conditional registration, which means you can register and vote at a voting center on Election Day itself. One note on how this primary works for local races like district attorney. If any candidate gets more than 50% of the vote on June 2nd, they win outright. No runoff in November. For statewide races like governor, the top two candidates will go to November regardless of how much of the vote they get. Beyond the DA race and measures C and E, all the stuff we just talked about today, Oakland voters will also see Measure D on the ballot. That is a technical change to the city's old police and firefighter pension board. And you'll see Measure A, a parcel tax for the Peralta Community College District. You're also going to have an opportunity to vote on governor, lieutenant governor, state assembly, Congress, county supervisor for parts of Oakland, and 27, yes, 27 Superior Court judge seats. I recommend checking out Cal Matters and KQED for more info on many of these races. Just a heads up for those looking for information on those 27 judge seats, I'm sorry to say there's just not as much coverage out there on these crucial positions as there needs to be. I sincerely hope that we at Oaklandside and the other city-side newsrooms could help fix that in the future. And by the way, that gives me an opening to say we are a nonprofit, independent newsroom fueled by community support. Your contributions help us do the reporting you heard today, and with enough support, more kinds of reporting down the road. You can find all of our June 2nd election coverage at oaklandside.org. We have an election page with all of our stories and more resources. Link is in the show notes. That is this week's episode of Oaklandside 510. Sorry, no headlines this week. We just had so much election ground to cover. But you can find all of the stories we talked about today and all of our other recent reporting at oaklandside.org. Sign up for the daily newsletter to get our reporting in your email inbox. If you haven't already, leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. And by the way, here is one that we got recently that I would love to share with you. This one is titled, Keeps Me in Touch from Abroad. I moved to Canada with my spouse years ago, but I still really want to keep informed about the local news from my hometown, so this is a must listen for me. I don't often have lots of time to read articles on the Oakland side, but getting to listen to the podcast while going about my errands is so helpful. That was from Jesse. Thank you, Jesse. I hope you hear this. And folks, if you've got one to share with us, I'd love to read it on air. This episode was produced by Mark Nieto, hosted by me, Tasneem Raja. On behalf of our entire newsroom, thank you for showing up for Oakland. We'll see you next week.